Hello, friends. I'm Kerry Pharr. Welcome to In Your Corner. Two of my good friends are here today, and these two gentlemen have had just an amazing life. Dr. Dan Hale and Don Hale are here, and you wouldn't know that these handsome gentlemen were actually in the boxing business. Dr. Dan, Don, so good to see you. Thank you for joining us on In Your Corner today.
Good to be here.
Good to be back, Kerry.
Yeah, good to see you. Dan, take us back. Did your brother get you involved in the sport of boxing?
No, Frankie and Randall lived in Morristown, Tennessee.
Where you practiced?
Yeah, that's just a little bit east of Knoxville. And so I saw him in the amateur days and watched him kind of come up. And another guy, his name was King also, instead of Don King.
Dick King.
Dick King, right. And so Dick had his contract. So I was talking to Dick King, and I said, boy, I love boxing. I like Frankie. How about if can I buy the contract from you? And so he said, okay, $26,000. And so I said, okay, we'll do it. So I gave him $26,000. My wife said to me—
Hold that thought just a sec. All right, folks. Frankie Randall, $26,000. Now, in a little bit, you're going to find out this is the guy that beat Julio, Cesar, Chavez, and you guys made a lot of money off that 26. So go back to your story.
But very quickly, what he's not telling you, he didn't know that Frankie was going to jail when he paid for the contract. The contract ran out while Frankie was in jail.
That's true. We had to wait a little bit. But when he got out, so we fought several different ones.
Yeah, but you said you paid $26,000, and your wife did what?
My wife said, well, it's a waste of $26,000, but it's your money. You can do what you want. And, of course, Frankie, when he beat Chavez, it was $1 million. So for that one fight, so. But
take us back. So you bought his contract for $26,000. Don, pick up there. What happened after he bought his contract?
Well, Frankie had a little problems with substance abuse from time to time.
Yeah.
And Frankie had gone into a place and somebody wanted some drugs, and Frankie went out and got them for him, supposedly from an undercover cop. And so Frankie gets sent to jail. Well, Dick King hadn't told Dan that
he was going
to jail whenever he paid him the $26,000 for the contract. So now Frankie is in jail. When he gets out, he comes and stays at Dan's house. So Dan got him to sign a contract now without having to pay anything, except feed him.
But you could have been out $26,000 because he didn't have to sign that contract.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Now, I remember Frankie Randall because in 1985, I had a fighter by the name of Daryl Fastfist Fuller, and we went to Morristown, Tennessee, and spent several days sparring with him when Dick King was managing him. And Dick King also had Ricky Parkey, who ended up being the cruiserweight champion of the world. But you guys didn't realize it, but this guy, I knew back in 85, long before you had him, that I could tell the way he worked with Fuller, because Fuller never was a world champion, but won the WBC Continental of America's championship. And they went to war, and I said to myself, this guy is going to be a world champion one day, and you recognize that too.
Sure. His speed was what I saw first, his speed, how fast he was. And also, by the way, while he was with us, while he stayed with us, I led him to the Lord.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was a fantastic experience too.
So here you are, a boxing manager leading people to the Lord. I mean, you're a Christian. That's amazing. There's not a lot of Christianity in boxing.
Yeah.
But I want to go back and see if you remember this, Dan. If you were there at the Knoxville Golden Gloves, I was there the year that Frankie was 16 years old, and he fought Bernard Taylor in the Southern Championship, and he was only 16. Bernard was another great fighter who had a lot more experience and was a lot older. Bernard won that night, and I remember Frankie Randall standing in a corner and crying because he lost to Bernard Taylor at 16 years of age.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't like to lose.
No, and that was the beautiful thing. Yeah. So, Don, bring us forward. What happened? How did you guys end up fighting the great, I guess we should call Frankie great too, but Julio Cesar Chavez was a legend, and you guys got this lightweight out of Morristown, Tennessee. Where the heck is that? And you got this guy, Frankie, the Surgeon Randall. And how in the world did you hook up with, get that fight?
Well, first of all, Dan was like, neither one of us knew anything about the fight game, nothing. But when Frankie, Dan got him a couple fights with Jerry Cooney, promoted a couple shows, and Frankie won a couple fights. So he started looking for a promoter. He took him and talked to Joe Frazier in Philadelphia. and then went and talked to Don King.
That was an experience, Joe Fred.
And so Don signed Frankie, and Don said that if Frankie could win a big fight, he would give him a fight
Don
with Chavez.
King?
Don King said he would give him a fight with Julio Cesar Chavez. So Frankie had a couple small fights. Then he fought Edwin Rosario. Rosario was one of Frankie's 2 losses in his career. He had lost earlier in his career.
Puerto Rican champion, right?
To Rosario. And Frankie always said the hardest he was ever hit was by Rosario. Well, Frankie fights Rosario down in Memphis, 7th round.
At the Pyramid.
In the 2nd round, Frankie gets knocked down, gets hurt bad.
Oh,
seventh round.
Let me tell that first. So when he got knocked down by Rosario, I mean, he was down holding on to the ropes, and we were screaming over on the other corner, saying, "Get up, get up, get up." He climbed up the next rope, got up on his feet, and the bell rung.
Oh.
And so he came over, sat down, and Frankie, you okay? For 30 seconds, he just kind of, and so finally he walked, remember that? He said, okay, hey, I'm okay.
Wow.
And then he finally stopped him in the 7th round.
Yeah.
So from that, he had another small fight after that. But what was interesting is Dan and I saw Chavez fight the fight before, Terrence Ali. And in that fight, what I saw was Frankie can beat him. Mm-hmm. Frankie will beat him. And I told everybody, I said, he's going to beat him. Now, will he get a decision or not, you don't know. But after seeing Chavez fight Terrence Ali, Frankie's going to win the fight. And so when he got the fight, Frankie dominated the fight. But what you have to understand is we also had one Mexican judge. Frankie knocks him down the first time Chavez had ever been off his feet.
He slipped.
Yeah. as an amateur or a pro, Frankie knocks him down in the 11th round. Richard Steele took 2 points away from Chavez, and the Mexican judge still gave the fight to Chavez, so he wins a split decision. Then when they're interviewing Chavez after the fight, they ask him about the knockdown. I slipped. Right. Now, Frankie hit him with a straight jab and then a straight right hand, set straight back on his rear end.
I have pictures of him literally
laying
laying on his back with his feet and hands up, and he slipped. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you beat the great Julio Cesar Chavez.
92-0.
17-1 underdog. Chavez was 89-0-1. He'd had a draw, but 89-0-1 the night we fought him.
And that was a big, big shocker.
Oh, the world was shocked at that one. Now, that was a major upset. Don King was really shocked because Chavez was his bell cow.
Yeah.
And that was his moneymaker. And everybody kept telling Don, maybe you shouldn't have Frankie fight him. And then Frankie beat him.
And then, you guys came back and fought him in a rematch. Got a lot more money. So was that $26,000 a pretty good investment?
That was a pretty good investment, right. My wife didn't say anything after that.
You guys lived off that for a while,
right.
didn't you?
Yeah, right.
And, and then what's interesting, Don, most people don't know, but while you were out there, Roger Mayweather came to you, the uncle of Floyd Mayweather Jr., and said what?
It was on a Monday before Frankie fought Chavez on Saturday night. I was out at the gym with
Because
Frankie.
you were living in Michigan at this time.
I lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the time. And I went to the gym with Frankie. And who just happened to be in there but Roger Mayweather. And someone told him that I was from Grand Rapids. And Roger comes over and says, I hear you're from Grand Rapids. Yes. He said, I have a nephew who's not in the gym. He's running the streets. His dad just went to prison. And said he really needs somebody to watch after him. Would you mind looking at him? I said, sure, have him give me a call. So the following week when I got back to Grand Rapids, Floyd called me. I met him at a Damon's barbecue. We went out to my house. The next day he moved into my house. He was 16 years old at the time. And I got him back in the gym. He had been living with his grandmother. Got him back in the gym. And in March, he won the National Golden Gloves. And was fighter of the tournament. By that time, he just turned 17. He was fighter of the tournament of the National Golden Gloves then.
So you raised him, and because of your managerial background with, Frankie Randall, you thought you'd end up managing him when he turned pro, but someone came along and offered him a carrot, and he took it.
Yeah, Floyd was, Floyd was good. I knew Floyd was going to be a phenomenal fighter. There was no question about that. And I started managing a lot of other fighters through that time. And once you got Frankie, and now then you got Floyd, and then Nate Jones came along, who won a bronze medal in the Olympics, who would have been heavyweight champion of the world if I could ever kept him sober. Phenomenal heavyweight. But then I had a lot of other fighters that started coming to me, and I never recruited fighters back then. They would come to me.
But because of what you'd done with these guys, they came out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and but Floyd, I knew he was a great fighter, but then he was young, and when the money came at the Olympics, Floyd left me. I mean, it was like having one of my kids, turn their back on me at that time.
I know.
And it was several years later. He had fought. I remember it was in Oakland, California, Jesus Chavez. And 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings, and it's Floyd. And he said, "Don, can I talk to you?" He said, "Sure." He said, I think about what you and Dixie did for me. Dixie's my wife. So I think about what y'all did for me every day. And I just want to tell you I'm sorry, and I'd like to see you. So I said, well, my next trip out to Vegas, I'll give you a call. And I did, and we've been very close ever since. Matter of fact, I'll probably see him next week.
But the deal is, he took the money and ran, but you could have you didn't have that much money, but somebody would have given you the money if he would have stayed with you.
What I had done is I had had Floyd sign an agreement with me, and I was going to take that agreement to go get someone to give him money up front. Bob Arum ended up giving him $100,000 up front, but I had a managerial contract that would have been worth a whole lot more. And but I didn't explain that to Floyd. My mistake is I did not let Floyd know what I was trying to do. And so he looked at it like I was trying to get all this money for a managerial contract rather than I was going to take that to get the money for him.
Yeah. They don't understand. I mean, these are young guys. They don't understand the business aspects of it. But you guys had an amazing run in the boxing business.
A lot of fun. I mean, when I think back on, I had, Dan was a doctor. He didn't have time to fool with it. So after Frankie, he was doing his boxing, or doing his doctoring business. With me, I had plenty of time. I got to know Carl King, Don King's son, became one of my best friends. We would talk on the phone at least 4 or 5 times a week. And it wasn't ever 10 or 15-minute conversations. It was more like hour and a half, 2-hour conversations. So Carl and I got very close, and which made me very close to Don. And then from there, I got to know Bob Arum. Bob would, he had me go out and try to recruit some guys for him later on.
Because you were a power broker because of who you had in the business.
So, and I really enjoyed looking at the amateurs and trying to project what those amateurs are going to do as a pro. And that was the thing that I felt like I was good at. Cameron Duncan got to be one of my best friends, who was I consider one of the better managers in boxing.
Met him numerous times,
and he and I would go to these tournaments together and sit and compare notes. He'd get on one side and I'd get on the other. And we would compare notes about fighters and see which ones that we liked.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was interesting with Chavez. The first time I actually saw him at a fight, of course, it was at the weigh-in, and of course there's just throngs of people in this big auditorium going up to the scale to weigh. And so when he walks in, of course he has 50 people around him, and I'm on my tiptoes looking. There he is, back there. That's him right there, and just barely see that much of him. And it was like, wow, that's Cesar Chavez. And 3 months later, I was standing as close as I am to you right now in the ring.
Because you managed the fighter that beat him.
Yeah.
Chavez was interesting. When we fought him the second time, beat him worse the second time than we did the first time, but we didn't get the decision this time. Frankie, in the 7th round of that fight, Frankie came back to the corner and said, he's ready to go. I'm going to knock him out this round. They go back out, start the 7th round. There's a headbutt. They clash heads. Chavez goes over, and Flip Pomaski was the ring doctor. He says, do you want to continue? And Chavez says, no.
He says, stop it.
Yeah.
In English.
Yeah. No, stop it. Well, that's the end of the fight. He stopped the fight, not Flip. He didn't stop it. Then when the referee asked Flip, he said, I stopped the fight. So now they go to the scorecards, and Frankie loses by 1 point. They actually took a point away from Frankie for an accidental headbutt. The WBC rules at the time, if you had an accidental headbutt, whoever did not get cut would have a point taken away from him. The last fight had ever happened that way, I understand. And they took a point away from Frankie, and he lost the fight.
So you guys got the shaft.
We got the shaft big time on that one. So then Frankie fights Juan Rosario, who was the WBA champion, beats him. Then we fight him again for a rematch in Miami. There's a headbutt. The headbutt this time, Frankie wins loses the first round and the second round, wins the third round, and winning the fourth round. There's a headbutt. Now then, when he gets hit, he goes down and will not get up. His corners tell him in Spanish, "Stay down, stay down." Mm-hmm. He will not get up, even though there was nothing wrong. He actually walked back to the corner, and they tell him to go down. He falls down. Yeah. They go to the scorecards, and Frankie loses the fight. This was the fifth round, I guess, and loses the fight 3-2.
Oh, my.
I want to tell you another story, though. In that first fight, so Don was back in the dressing room with me, and so we're trying to figure out how to get Don into the ring. And so I said, "Here, take these towels." And I hand him a stack of towels. And so you see him walking out, we've got pictures of him, holding these towels. So I go up to the steps, I step through the ropes, I step into the ring, and so then all of a sudden I hear a thud. And what he was coming in behind me, he tripped. And so
he stuck his foot out, and I tripped over his foot.
And he looks up, and there's Don King looking right down there. "What are you doing down there?"
Well, you guys had a wonderful time. What is going on with Frankie these days?
Very, very sad. Yeah. Frankie's in East Tennessee in a nursing home, and boy, it really surprised me because later in the career, when Frankie would fight for money, he had some big fights where he'd be winning a fight. I remember his fight for the number one position, and basically he should have already quit, but he was just fighting for money at this time, and he's winning the fight in the 8th round. Every judge's scorecard. Frankie gets hit a couple times and quits. And this happened several times to where when I'm in the corner, Frankie would get on the other side of the ring and quit on that side of the ring because he knows I'm going to be hollering at him. And so he quit. But I guess with the substance abuse he had and with being hit as much as he did for his whole life, Frankie now doesn't remember. He wouldn't know who we are. We walk in.
That's so sad.
Roger Mayweather just passed away. The same thing with Roger. You see these guys that give their whole
drunk dementia.
Yeah, they give their whole life to this sport that we all love, and then they get that in their 50s and they don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, so of course Jerry Quarry was one of the first ones to die with it, and it really is sad. But you guys had a wonderful time in the business, and I did too, and didn't have the success that you guys did, but went all over the world with boxers. Africa, Europe, South America, Hawaii. It was a wonderful ride, and I know we all miss it.
Well, I was just talking about Emmanuel Stewart with Dan this morning. Emmanuel, I can remember Frankie fighting in Monterrey, Mexico, and Tommy Hearns is there with Emmanuel. And Emmanuel finds out I'm from Michigan, and we start talking. He invites me to come back to his hotel room. So there I sat for at least 2 hours talking to Emmanuel Stewart and Tommy Hearns now. For somebody that hadn't been in the sport that long, that's pretty. That's pretty big.
Those are big names for those of us in the community.
And I got to be very good friends with Emmanuel. And when he would broadcast on HBO on a Saturday night fight, on the way to the airport or at the airport, almost all of these fights, he would call me and we would discuss the fight that happened the night before. And I miss that. And miss Emmanuel a lot. He was really a nice guy.
He was good to me. I used one of his trainers, Luther Burgess.
Oh, yeah.
And Luther, before he trained my guy, Keith McKnight, wanted me to have a meeting with Emmanuel, and we went to eat lunch in Detroit, 25 years ago, and Emmanuel gave his blessing, and Luther was with us about a year and then passed away. But, it was a wonderful ride. I want to switch gears a little bit here, Dan, because let's talk about you. You've gone through a tremendous tragedy in the last year. You lost your childhood sweetheart, your wife of
55 years.
And it was very hard on you.
It was.
And you've been doing missionary work. You have a ministry. Folks, these are a couple boxing guys. But Dr. Dan and Don are Christians. And Dr. Dan won Frankie Randall to the Lord. And now you're doing medical missionary work in Dominican Republic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, first of all, it started actually in Africa. As a physician, there was a couple missionaries, husband and wife, who actually live here in Nashville, and they came home for furlough. I live in East Tennessee, so they were visiting for that year, and they actually chose Morristown, Tennessee. I mean, just it had to be God working, and they went to the same churches. So I got to know them, and Bob, his wife's name is Becky. So Becky was a nurse, and so she said, "Will you come to Africa and help us with some of the mission work, medical mission there?" And I was thinking, my goodness, I'm working 18 hours a day now. I don't have time to go to Africa. For a year, the Lord worked on me. Finally, I talked to a pharmacist friend of mine and one of my nurses, and I said, "Will you go to Africa with me?" And that changed my life. I remember when we were in a room there with the Bob, and he stood up before us. We three of us sitting on a sofa, and he said, "I'm telling you, it's going to change your life. It'll never be the same." And I remember sitting in that sofa thinking, I'm going to go back to my busy practice, and all this will just be a 1 week experience. But after that, went back over and over and over again. Now we have a school, has 250 students there. We have a clinic that's open 24 hours a day. The young man who was a nurse at that time that worked with me, he was like 20 years old, and now he's 56, I think. He has a PhD in religion from a college here in the United States, from a university in the States, and he now has 500 pastors that he mentors. Wow. In the country of Benin, West Africa, small country right next to Nigeria. So then after that, come back to the States, and I started attending a Hispanic church. I was wanting to learn Spanish, so I attended a Hispanic church for 18 years. The pastor there was a missionary in Venezuela. And so we got to know each other, good friends. He's 20 years younger than me. But one day he called me and said, "We need a physician to go with us to have a medical clinic in Venezuela." So I went with him. At that time, it was a beautiful country. Now it's a mess with the new president there. So I've been in Venezuela, I think, 5 or 6 times. Well, then after that, another pastor in Alabama called me, and he says that our team has been going to Dominican Republic, but we'd like to have medical clinics there. Would you come as a doctor? And that was probably 2 or 3 years ago. I went down, worked as a physician with them. I loved it. I've been down there 6 times before. Well, then when my wife passed away, she was with me on all these mission trips. And so she loved missions. And so I said, "I'm just sitting at my house looking at the walls. This is doing no good at all." So I said, "I got to move on." So I knew she loved missions. So I went back to the Dominican Republic and worked there for a week. I did that a couple of times, came back, and I said, "Boy, I'm going to go back so I went back again and stayed for 3 months. I came back home for Christmas, went back again in January. But I'll explain to you kind of how the clinics work real quickly. Usually the people in Dominican Republic, they'll find a poor community that doesn't even have a church. And so they'll go out and canvass the community and say, "Come to this clinic. It's going to be next week. You'll get free medicine," and so forth. So the people, when they come, I'm there, and usually we have 1 or 2 either student doctors or doctors that are members of the church. They'll come with me. So when the people come in and register, immediately they are put in an area to where they'll be meeting with someone who gives them the spiritual counseling and present the gospel. Sometimes a group will come, often a group of 5 or 6 or 12 people. One time we had 40 people came at one time from 4 different states. So a Dominican who speaks the language, of course, then would meet along with a person from the United States. And so the United States person would say something in English, translate it, and they would lead the person to the Lord there. But after their counsel with them, they see the doctor. I see them, write a prescription, and then they go over to another table over and they get their free medicine. That was the first 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It cost $500 for to buy the medicine. I don't get
for 3 days. It costs $500,
right. And I don't get a dime of that. I pay my own way. It's all 100% of that goes toward the medicine. Well, in that period of time, usually we'll see 140, 150 people a day. Well, on an average, probably 150 to 175 people are saved in that 3 days.
So in 3 days, For $500, the medicine cost, you'll see 175 people come to the Lord.
Yeah, and then after that, so then the people in that community that's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, they go back to those people's homes and make sure that they're doing well after their salvation experience.
Wow. Folks, I don't come to you with a financial appeal that often, but I know Dr. Dan personally, known him and Don for years. And Dr. Dan goes over there, pays his own way to the Dominican Republic, pays for medicine. And you heard, for $500, that's just for the medicine, but in that 3 days, they'll see 175 people on average come to the Lord. I want to ask you today to consider supporting Dr. Dan's ministry and underwriting what he does to go and win these precious souls to the Lord in Dominican Republic. Dr. Dan, how would somebody connect with you and donate and underwrite your ministry there?
Well, first of all, I don't receive the money myself. There is a Christian organization in Morristown. They do missions in India and different places. His name is David Stepp. But what I would like for them to do, if they have any interest at all, my email address, it's very, very easy. Dr. Dan Hale @gmail.com. They send me an email, drdanhale@gmail.com, and I will respond to them, and I can tell them where to send it to, how to make the check out, and it's a tax-deductible donation for that.
Tax-deductible. Dr. Dan Hale
@gmail.com.
@gmail.com. Dr. Dan Hale @gmail.com, and we'll get the website information for you as well. I really appreciate you guys coming and joining us on the program today. It's been a real pleasure. I mean, from World Championship Boxing, you're doing the real deal anyway. You're going down there and winning people to Christ. That's what's going to matter for eternity, not what we did inside or outside of the boxing ring, right?
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure seeing you fellas. I honor you and just honor being a friend of yours, and so proud to have you on the show today. And friend, if you don't know the Lord, Dr. Dan will tell you, all you got to do is realize that Jesus died to save you, was buried, and then stayed in the grave 3 days to prove that he was dead, and rose again to prove that he was God. The fact that he died proved that he was a man. The fact that he rose again proved that he was God, and that he can resurrect you just like he resurrected himself. So today, we invite you to give your life to Jesus Christ. Just admit that you're a sinner, ask Jesus Christ to come into your life, be the Lord of your life, and be your Savior, and he will do it. We thank you so very much for watching In Your Corner today. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week on the next edition of In Your Corner. But don't forget, Dr. Dan Hale @gmail.com. This is a worthy ministry, worthy of your support. And if you want to connect with us, our website is inyourcorner.info. Thank you again. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week on the next edition of In Your Corner.